Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we take a look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. I'm Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I'm joined by my co-host.
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian. And, well, seems to me if we're going to do a podcast about Daniel Webster, we should be offering him some good insight, not waiting for him to offer us that insight.
I don't even know which character you're trying to do an impression of this
I don't
time.
know if I was doing an impression, more of
okay.
that was the whole point of Jabez. That's when he got the town on his side. We shouldn't be asking what Daniel Webster can do for us. We should be thanking Daniel Webster for coming to me, feeding him, and giving him all the nice things.
That's not what Daniel Webster can do for you, but what you can do for Daniel Webster.
What can this podcast do for good old Daniel Webster? That's how we're going to turn this country in New Hampshire right around.
Yes, well, Daniel Webster has been dead for like 175 years, so I don't think there's much that can be done for him. But we'll do our best. In this season of Awesome Movie Year, we're talking about the films of 1941, and we're here at our flop episode for a movie with many titles. All That Money Can Buy is the main title under which it was released. It is also, however, known as The Devil and Daniel Webster, which is the title of the short story upon which it was based. Also been released under the titles of Mr. Scratch, Daniel and the Devil, and Here Is a Man.
The last one being the worst of those titles, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, descriptive, although there's more than one man in this movie. But
Here Are the Men?
The Men, yeah, that's even worse. But it was initially retitled The Devil and Daniel Webster, the short story by Stephen Vincent Benét, which was published in 1936, was extremely famous. It had been already adapted into a stage play, and so the title was very well known. But because there had been an unrelated movie from earlier this year called The Devil and Miss Jones, the studio decided that they needed to retitle it to avoid confusion.
Of course, because Miss Jones and Daniel Webster, clearly you would confuse one for the other, dude. So that makes perfect sense, right? So
yeah, and especially given that this story was so famous. I mean, every review that I looked up, all the coverage talks about how well known this was. So why would you get rid of the brand recognition that you've got, the IP, as we would talk about it today, and give it an unrelated title? Maybe that's one of the reasons why the movie was not successful. I don't know, but it did lose $53,000 in its initial release. It's tough to get all the details of every budget and box office figures, as I always say.
Wasn't The Devil and Miss Jones like a porn, like one of those like Debbie Does Dallas like story pornos of the 60s too?
I think that could have been The Devil in Miss Jones.
Oh, there you go. That's pretty good.
But
me and Mrs. Jones, we got a thing going on.
I have not seen The Devil and Miss Jones, but
we need a porno season.
Oh, hey, but you know what? I was right. Here's the Wikipedia page, says, not to be confused with the 1973 pornographic film, The Devil in Miss Jones. So
back when like Boogie Nights porns were going, where Burt Reynolds style producers were like, we're going to make this a real story that's going to affect people with fucking.
Right, exactly. Those exist. I mean, we talked about last season, Abel Ferrara and his debut film that was a porn that I think has some artistic ambitions, but that's not what we're talking about here.
But real fast, those listeners out there, please chime in, hit us up on the socials. Let us know your favorite story-based porns.
Yeah, The Devil and Miss Jones, however, from 1941 is not a porn. It is a film starring Jean Arthur, a comedy, and it was nominated for a couple of Oscars, but for whatever reason, they decided that this needed to be differentiated from that. So it was released under this other title, which did not seem to do it any favors. And after it was released and it lost money, the studio backtracked and re-released it under the original title, but also cut 22 minutes out of it to cut it from 107 minutes to 85 minutes. And that didn't really seem to work out either. It's since been restored on home video, and what we watched on the Criterion channel is the full 107-minute version. So a lot of efforts to kind of find an audience for this movie in its initial release that didn't really work out. But now it's been fairly highly acclaimed. Criterion has released a full edition of it with restoration and features and everything like that. So eventually it's gotten its due. But at the time, audiences were not keen to watch. Maybe they just had enough of this story in its various incarnations. I don't know.
Or it just wasn't that good, Josh.
Maybe so. We'll discuss. You're not the only one who thought that. It was, however, nominated for 2 Oscars. It won the Best Original Score Oscar for Bernard Herrmann's score, and Walter Huston was nominated for Best Actor for his portrayal of Mr. Scratch, aka the Devil. And I feel like, Jason, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like even if you didn't like this movie, you have to praise Walter Huston's performance. Yeah. He's so good here.
I agree. Category fraud, of course. He's a supporting actor, even in the 40s. But
wow, even in the 40s, we've got category fraud.
But I agree with you. I'm all for that nomination. And of course, Bernard Herrmann winning the Best Score. I think both of those are good. Like, that's never my problem with this movie.
So. Yeah, although it is crazy that Bernard Herrmann won that Oscar by defeating himself for Citizen Kane.
Well, nobody even knows what that movie is anymore. So whatever, dude. So yeah, I mean, Bernard Herrmann has to go in our awesome movie or a Hall of Fame, right? Didn't we? We've talked about him so many times, and I feel like, didn't we just talk about him recently for a comedy score, or was that Elmer Bernstein that I feel it was Bernard Herrmann, right? So, Airplane. Did you do the Airplane score, Dave?
I don't remember. Was it him?
I'm pretty sure he did not do the Airplane score.
Yeah, I don't think so.
No, because he was dead 5 years before that movie came out.
It was Elmer Bernstein. I'm conflating these two legends, but Bernard Herrmann, an epic a legend of film scoring as well.
He is absolutely, and this score is really good. I mean, hard to compare anything to any aspect of Citizen Kane, but the score is great, and Walter Huston is great. But audiences did not show up for this film, and critics were not necessarily super into it either. Bosley Crowther in the New York Times said,
"Harumph."
Basically, yes. After praising the original short story, which we should say is about a farmer who sells his soul to the devil and then recruits Daniel Webster, who was a famous member of Congress and an orator, to defend him in a trial versus the devil. So after praising the story, Bosley Crowther says, "This, we say, should be the substance of an extraordinary film. It is not. For director William Dieterle has failed to bring into related focus before our eyes that which is supposed to be real and that which is supernatural. The illusion of imaginative release is not properly created, so that one is likely to be confused by the constant interplay of shadow and substance without any explanations. The Devil and Daniel Webster should have made into a fine, simple film. It should never have been elaborated out of proportion to its original modest frame. It should have been told as a fireside story without a lot of sounding brass. And it should have been directed by someone who understood New England."
Shots fired, Dieterle. That's some interesting points there. One, I didn't like the movie, but I don't necessarily agree with his points on it. I do think it could have been streamlined, but I was never confused about like the supernatural versus the regular elements. The thing that I gravitate towards on that review is the idea of what New England is, because obviously we're shooting on sound stages and we're not really getting that feel. There are no accents per se. So that was an interesting point, especially even all the way back in 1941. I think that's kind of something unique to look at.
Yeah, I guess. And he talks elsewhere in that review specifically about the sound stages and how things look artificial and they should have shot it on location. And I mean, I am not a New Englander. I went to college in Massachusetts, but I wouldn't claim to be an expert. But to me, one of the things that I really liked about the movie was how gorgeously artificial the sets look, which is something that's often really appealing about old school, about classic films. And I mean, this is not a realistic movie, as he points out. So I wasn't like, oh, they didn't capture the true spirit of, salt of the earth, New Hampshire farmers here or whatever, because it's a fable. And also the sort of interplay between the real and the supernatural and how those bleed into each other and what is real and what is imagined and whatever is another part of the appeal, which I thought was one of the great things about this movie. So I'm harumph to Bosley Crowther as far as I'm concerned.
Well, I mean, we go back to Sergeant York, which also set in this kind of small countryside town, right? And you couldn't really tell the difference between one setting or the other there, is what I think the argument is. That said, we've covered Dieterle before, and he's very good with locations, and he's a very good technical, proficient director. And I don't think that was the problem with this film either.
Yeah, I think his film looks gorgeous, even if you're not engaged in the story. Herbert Cohn in the Brooklyn Eagle, also not really a fan. He says, "The trouble with the devil is that he's asked to shoulder too much. His fable is stretched from short story to full-size novel to make an 1.75-hour movie. A scene is added here, another there. And as it grows, it becomes more unwieldy. Too much for the devil to handle. Too much for even director William Dieterle to keep light and bouncy. Mr. Benét, the original author, helped write the screenplay, so he can blame himself in part.
Oh, snap.
He can be thankful, though, that Mr. Dieterle had Walter Huston as Mr. Scratch, Edward Arnold as Daniel Webster, and James Craig and Anne Shirley as the farmer and his wife. They play with deep sincerity, showing in snatches how fine a screenplay All That Money Can Buy might have been."
So I'm going to agree there that I do feel like that they didn't have the clear-cut narrative of making the devil as devilish as he should be, Josh. I get that Huston was playing him with charm, and we've seen that before. Devil's Advocate, clearly this movie was based on the Devil's Advocate. We all know that. Yes. Keanu and Pacino. This was.
I love the Devil's Advocate.
It's great. It's so campy and fun. Yeah. I agree. I really like that one too. So, but I do think that there could have been some clarity on why. Obviously we know the story and the fable, but I think there could have been some clarity on what the intention was with collecting these souls.
It's the devil. He
doesn't really do anything with them, though. But he doesn't do anything with them. So,
we don't see what he's doing when he's not.
Yeah. What's the next thing to do with them?
So you wanted to have some scenes in hell with him torturing the souls that he's bought?
I feel like this is the ultimate shorthand. Like, you really just need to know in this case.
No, but I mean, but it's just there, and he doesn't do anything after that. Well, I put it on a tree, so you're mine now. And it's like, I just don't feel it says. I don't think it captured the mood of what was intended.
I don't know what you're even talking about there. I think you're so we know exactly. No one doesn't know what it means to sell your soul to the devil.
I understand that.
1941.
I'm not complaining that it wasn't clear. It just said nothing really happened after that. He became obsessed with money, and it's like, oh, so you're American? Got it. There was nothing beyond there that the devil. There's no twist to it, dude.
Does there need to be a twist? The devil is going to get his soul after the 7 years. He doesn't have it yet. But because he sold his soul, he's been corrupted. And sure, yes, many Americans are greedy and are obsessed with money. But
Josh, I hear what you're saying. I just think it needed to be elevated to the next level to really capture the stakes here.
I think the stakes could not be clearer. And I think that this is not a horror movie. It's not. It's a fable. It's a folktale. And I think we clearly see how Jabez changes, whether he is simply changing into a typical greedy businessman or he's changing into something more sinister. The point is that he wasn't like this before. And having sold his soul, even though the devil has yet to come to actually collect it and torture him in hell, has ruined him. And that's why he needs to be released from this contract at the end of the movie. So I feel like the stakes are very obvious throughout the film.
Again, I'm agreeing. I understand the stakes. I was just kind of bored with the way it was executed.
Yeah. All right. Well, finally, Virginia Wright in the Los Angeles Daily News had a positive take on this. She said, William Dieterle's All That Money Can Buy is Goethe's Faust, transferred to a New Hampshire farm in the middle 1840s. It is also the final evolution of Stephen Vincent Benét's The Devil and Daniel Webster, which has been applauded as folktale, play, and opera. Now, as a motion picture, this story of a farmer who sells his soul to the devil emerges in its most impressive form. William Dieterle has captured a remarkably unearthly mood for much of All That Money Can Buy, and his cast has responded beautifully to his direction. Walter Huston's Mr. Scratch is the most agreeable devil that Goethe or anybody else ever has imagined. He has an almost elfin charm. Even his demonical grin seems to spring more from self-assurance than evil.
Was demonical a word? Wouldn't it just be demonic?
Well, yeah, it's sometimes they use different forms in the olden days, but it could be demonic as well.
I mean, we just mentioned Pacino. Do you have any favorite devil performances, Josh?
Devils? Man, that's a good question. Pacino is really good. I mean, Pacino, that movie, I wrote an article about it like a year or two ago with the sort of the point that like, that's the movie where late period Pacino chewing all the scenery really is appropriate for the role when it often isn't.
Heat is also there. Any Given Sunday, like he's got a few good ones in that era, and I mean he's amazing in The Insider. So
yeah, I mean I just mean that like he goes fully over the top in that film, and it's very enjoyable to watch. And so that is a great one. I'm sure I could think of others if I had prepared this, but it's the kind of thing. Obviously, if you're an actor and you get cast to play Satan, you're going to have a good time with it.
Right. And Little Nicky is probably Dave's favorite. But you mentioned Huston and the fact that he did this as like such an amiable, charming, like whimsical devil really is a cool characterization of Beelzebub.
Right. Yeah, I think that is. And I don't know, you seem to think maybe that he wasn't evil enough, but I liked that he was evil, but he was also kind of friendly and fun. And even when they're doing the trial and he's mad, he's like, well, Daniel Webster, you got me. Guess I'll have some pie and move on to the next one. And I liked that about him.
He did eat his pie. It was cartoonish in that like kind of ending. It was very Looney Tunesy.
I guess, but I thought it fit with it, the characterization of the way that they were portraying that character. So.
What pie would you eat if the devil took your soul, Josh?
I don't know. French silk pie. That's good.
You do like that one,
I do, yeah. It's, chocolatey.
Dave, any favorite pies?
I like pecan pie.
A classic. Chocolate pecan pie, even elevated sometimes.
Right. Would you sell your soul for some chocolate pecan pie?
No, I wouldn't. I would not do it. My mom used to make a chocolate chip pie that was quite delicious. That's a very unique one. Yeah. So.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Well, I don't think any of us had seen this film before. Had you read? I was trying to remember if I had ever read the short story like in school.
I think we did. I think we did read it in high school. I don't know if that was back in, New Hampshire, adjacent state, New Jersey, which isn't adjacent at all. It's just the same Northeast area. But I've read this story a long time ago. It's a well-known, kind of short story. And can I just say that period of time, maybe the golden age of American short stories. What do you think about that, Josh?
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I can't say that I am knowledgeable enough to assert that, but it does seem like a period of time, especially because that was an era when all of these magazines that were extremely popular were publishing short fiction all the time. And that really died out by probably the 70s. And I think also because, this also applies to stage plays, that in this era of film, short stories and stage plays were constantly being adapted as films. That was the sort of IP rush of this era. And so, a story like this could be, this was a very popular story, but even a story that wasn't like a huge pop culture sensation could become a very successful film, and, maybe even more than once. So, yeah, I think that's about right. I don't recall. I feel like this is a story that I should have read and would have read in an English class in high school. It's along the lines of, I was thinking of like an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, the Ambrose Bierce short story.
That's a great one.
Yeah. And also has this sort of like Twilight Zone-y quality to it. And I know I read that one, but I'm not sure if I read this one. Dave, we know you don't read. Would you have read this short story?
It's a possibility. You never know. I scored a short film that was, based off of this whole idea. So,
oh, really?
Whoa. What's that called?
It was called Crossroads, similar.
Bone.
Did it have Daniel Webster, or was it just a character who sold their soul to the devil?
Yeah, just that whole, classic.
Like Robert Johnson?
Yep.
The guitarist? Yep. That's what they say. Josh, as you know, this is a film podcast. So an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge, that's a great short film.
It is, and it was actually, I think, I want to say we watched that also in
I think
English class.
I saw that like once or twice, and it really captures like a very surrealist, magical, realist, like just kind of unique tone there.
Yeah, and it was actually, I think it was actually broadcasted because it's a short film. It was broadcast as an episode of The Twilight Zone at one point.
Right, that's what I remember of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I haven't seen that in a long time, but I feel like this captures a similar sensibility, that magical realist quality, what's real, what's not, and the sort of blurring of those lines, and the very heightened visual style and all of that. I just thought this worked on that level as well. And maybe it doesn't need to be 107 minutes. I don't know, but I didn't think it should have been 85 minutes necessarily. So I think this works on a similar level.
Well, you give it to Harvey Weinstein to chop up and we're all in trouble, baby.
Yeah, that's great. So anything else you want to say about the background of this film, Jason?
Josh, I would be remiss not to tell you that the original casting of Daniel Webster was awesome movie, your Hall of Famer, Thomas Mitchell, who would have just eaten this whole thing. Not that our boy didn't do well here, but Thomas Mitchell was filming this and he was on the horse and carriage and he fell off and cracked his skull. So they had to replace him. Obviously, we know Thomas Mitchell came out of it and made more fine films, but from our past episode on the Hunchback of Notre Dame, Dieterle Mitchell, I think Thomas Mitchell would have crushed this role.
I agree. And Edward Arnold is good. And I think they're similar kinds of actors, that they were very prolific character actors. They're all, and they were both, they were at least in one movie together. They were both in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. And I bet they were in other movies together as well. But there are these very reliable, character actor types. And I think, Mitchell would have done a great job, but Edward Arnold also does a very good job here. And really between him and Walter Huston, they kind of overshadow James Craig as the ostensible main character, Jabez Stone, who even aside from our opinion as viewers that he's overshadowed, he's like third billed in the movie where he is clearly the protagonist.
Well, you just mentioned Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. I think you might have needed like a Jimmy Stewart, or even, though we didn't like Sergeant York, a Gary Cooper type, someone with a little more meat on their bones and, who could kind of hold their own a little more against these two personalities.
Yeah, he's a bit of a lightweight in terms of his presence. So that is one of the weaker points of the film, I would say. So we'll come back and get into more of our general thoughts on All That Money Can Buy. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1941, we are talking about All That Money Can Buy, the box office flop based on The Devil and Daniel Webster. And Jason, it was also a flop with you, but we talked about Walter Huston. Was there anything else you particularly liked about this?
Yeah, I like the score a lot. And I did like those, like I was into it at the beginning when we're doing like these kind of negative images and impositions of like the devil getting there. And then, this is what in my Letterboxd go for Jason, Josh. So what I put about it is like, technically it's a good movie. Acting wise, good. To me, this just fell flat on the page. Like, I know what you're saying. It's, I did feel it was too long. I feel it was full of exposition that didn't ever get me to the next level. And I just lost interest quickly. The issue was when we got to the climax of the trial, I felt like they could have done more. That was an interesting, probably a great, the best sequence to me. But by that point in time, I was just fatigued on the whole thing.
Yeah, I will say, the trial is what this is famous for. If you know about the story, but maybe you haven't read it or if you've never seen any versions of it. And I think I was surprised to realize that it's such a small portion of the movie itself. It's not until the very end, and it's maybe 15 minutes or something of this 107-minute movie. So I was still engaged with the movie by the time it got to the trial. But I suppose I could have used more to that. And it's really just a vehicle for Daniel Webster to give a speech about being an American and the kind of hokey patriotism that we've been talking about quite a bit thus far this season. And that's not, I think, as we build up to it, that was a bit disappointing for me in terms of like, oh, that's what this is about. That's what we're going to get out of this sequence. because also visually, it's presented in such a cool, eerie way as they introduce all the damned jurors that are kind of rising up from hell, and you've got the judge who's was someone who persecuted witches in the Puritan times, and it's all shot in this kind of shimmery filter and all that, and it's really creepy looking and cool. And then you don't get much in the way of substance to it before Daniel Webster just goes and gives a speech that sounds like some kind of prepared remarks he'd give in Congress or whatever. And he gets, spoiler alert, he gets Jabez out of his deal.
I think back to A Few Good Men, also another influence on this film. And, there was no give and take there, right? It was just like, hey, you're the underdog, good luck. And then he goes and wins. But I wanted that kind of like, how do we get around all these obstacles to like kind of circumnavigate this trial and get the jury of traitors on his side? That's what I wanted, Josh. I wanted more to it. Paul Newman in the verdict. I wanted that. No, I mean, I did want more meat to the trial. You know that. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. But now I'm thinking as you describe this, I'm like, oh God, I don't want like the courtroom drama version of this movie. I think that would have been terrible. So
no, that's not true. You loved it. It's called The Devil's Advocate.
Right. But The Devil's Advocate doesn't spend all its time in a trial. It's not about the character winning a trial against the devil. It's about his personal struggle. And so, I mean, that's what this is about as well. It's about Jabez Stone struggling with the deal that he made and becoming more and more corrupt, and then having to finally realize what he's done to himself and rebel against that. And that's the main portion of the movie. And that's what I thought was well done. I mean, it's a morality play. It's in broad strokes. It's very Twilight Zone-ish before the Twilight Zone has existed, of course. But, I'm imagining like Rod Serling or something, submitted for your approval, one Jabez Stone, farmer. And, that stuff is always very, I mean, it can be very broad, but it's very effective. And I thought that this was as well. And maybe James Craig isn't the best actor, but I think he did convey that journey. And we have a whole supporting cast who bolster that in terms of their reactions to him as well.
So another film I'm thinking about of this time period is It's a Wonderful Life, right? And I feel like that really holds the mirror up in an incredibly effective way of what your life looks like going one way or the other. And I don't think this one did that as well. And then Josh, I do want to talk about the supporting cast, because to me, and I want to know your opinion on this, I know it's 1941 and this and that, but if I was this dude's wife, I'd be like, hit the bricks, fella, you suck, and she just sticks by him. And then, of course, there's a happy ending, but I just feel like that's a very unearned ending, except like, I'm a good woman, I stand by his side no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, not only is it 1941 when the movie is made, but
1926
it takes place in 1840,
right?
In the 1840s. So that just does not happen during that time period. So I think the movie clearly wants you to have that reaction, like, oh, he's being so terrible. How could she put up with this? Because you want to understand how bad his behavior is. But I was surprised, I guess maybe almost on the opposite end, because they're pretty upfront about the fact that he's having an extramarital affair with Belle, the maid, who maybe is not even a real human person, who shows up here, played greatly by Simone Simon in a very seductive kind of semi-evil Bride of Dracula performance. And he's clearly having sex with her. And I think the movie not only doesn't shy away from that, but it highlights, I mean, that's the point. This is like a clear element of his corruption. And then he's able to have the happy ending, even though he had an extramarital affair, which is really rare, I think, in a Code era movie. And maybe because she's a sort of supernatural creature or something, they skirted that. I don't know. But that was what surprised me.
Yeah, she kind of reminded me of that that Jessica Lange character in All That Jazz, who's this kind of like, hey, I will reinforce whatever instinct you're going for at this point in time. And are you a person or are you a supernatural element? But yeah, I mean, you know, Jabez just treats his wife so terribly, and like he's flaunting it in front of her, and he's like, "You can't discipline our kid. He's our kid. You know, let him do whatever he wants." And if she murdered him, I wouldn't have been that upset about it.
Right, and I think that is how you're meant to feel. That you really get the sense of how terrible he's being and how far he has strayed from the good person that he was that we saw at the beginning of the movie. And yeah, that kid's a real little shit. Although they redeem the kid too.
It's not really his fault if he has an enabling father who's just like, go and do whatever you want. But yeah, he's terribly behaved because the dad won't let anyone discipline him, you know?
Right. Exactly. Yeah, no, that is true. And of course, when the dad, when Jabez turns his life around, the kid is better behaved. But yeah, I mean, I liked all that stuff. I thought it was effectively conveyed. I liked Simone Simon. I thought she was very good at being the semi-evil seductress who also always has some excuse for like, oh, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm so innocent. You know, I thought that was a well drawn character. And you know, we get some stuff about like the politics of farming with the Grange that the other farmers want Jabez to join, which wasn't all that interesting. But I think it did make it clear like how he's also mistreating those people.
He did. Yeah, he does. He sets him up on a terrible deal. Like, hey, I'm going to help you. And just crazy that a rich person would take advantage of the less fortunate, Josh.
Right. But I mean, you know, we see previously the character Miser Stevens, who I wasn't sure if that was meant to be his name or they just called him that. I love that everyone just like, that's his title. It's like Asshole Jones over here.
You know? Asshole Jones. That might have been in The Devil and Miss Jones. Yeah. You know what I love, Josh? Jabez. when old tough moms call their sons out in multiple octaves, I'm all there for it. So, you know.
Yeah. And his mom is, you know, she's the salt of the earth. She's really, you know, she sticks to her principles as well. And she, just like the wife, kind of stands by him and is ready to be there for him when he returns to his.
I get that. I get that on the mom. She's like, you suck, Jabez, but I'm still your mom. You're not fucking another mom. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's a little different. I just felt the wife got railed and not in the Devil and Miss Jones type way. You know, Josh, we're talking about our kind of love affair, and then there's going to be this big party where Daniel Webster's the guest of honor. And I felt like that was the most effective use of surrealism, where like we're dancing out of speed or out of time, and Herman's really doing stuff with the musicality there. And that was like De Palma-esque to me, that sequence.
Yeah, that sequence is great. And that brings back Miser Stevens, who we learn has also sold his soul to the devil, not really surprisingly. And the devil is there to collect on him. And he is in this sort of manic, desperate state. John Quaylen is the actor who plays Miser Stevens, and I feel like does a really good job there. And we see this dance sequence, right? Suddenly the party is full of people, but are those people real? And what's going on? And he sort of like dances him to death almost, and then claims his soul. And it is creepy. Again, this is not a horror movie in any way, but there are moments that are kind of unsettling.
I keep referencing other movies we've covered, but The Shining would be a good example of something like that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very influential. And I mean, some of those things that we're talking about, maybe it's the short story that's more influential because it's more widely known. Although I don't know, do people still read that like in school or whatever?
I hope so.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what's done in this film narratively and visually is very influential, is very effective. And you know, and it did keep me engaged. So I liked the performances. And we haven't, you know, said as much about Edward Arnold, but he is that right balance of kind of like upright and righteous, but also folksy and human as Daniel Webster. I feel like aside from the big speech he gives at the trial, he doesn't come off as just like some sort of pompous mouthpiece for patriotism. He has his own human weaknesses, right? He falls asleep when he's supposed to be visiting the town and inspiring the people. He take some alcoholic drinks from the devil there, even though he knows it's the devil. But he's also upstanding. I mean, one of the things in the early part of the movie that you talked about, in addition to those negative images of the devil just sort of like intruding on Jabez, is the devil himself shows up and tempts Daniel Webster and says, hey, you want to be president of the United States? Sell me your soul. And Daniel Webster is like, no.
Yes.
Unlike any politician who exists now, probably.
Right. But he is very charismatic, and you could see why people get behind him and kind of root for him. And I think maybe it's even a little more clear in the story, like kind of staying on that path versus going for the greedy path that Jabez chose and everything. So I had no problem with the acting. I had no problem with the directing. I love the score. Like I said, my issue is on the page here.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing about Daniel Webster is, even though Jabez is a total dick, once he says, hey, can you help me get out of this contract? Daniel Webster is there. Like, anything for a New Hampshire man. I'm all for it.
Live free or die, bro.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So this movie is very pro New Hampshire. And maybe that was one of the New England things I didn't understand. Like at the beginning, when the farmers are coming to Jabez to try to get him to join the Grange, and one of them is from Massachusetts and one of them is from Vermont, and they're making out like there's some sort of big like regional difference, like we have to set all these things aside to come together. And I don't
maybe
know,
it was
the same to me.
Yeah, it could have been. Who knows? Have you guys ever been to New Hampshire? It's a very beautiful state.
I don't know that I have. I mean,
maybe.
I've been to Massachusetts. Like I said, I went to college there. Dave, you grew up in the Northeast also.
Yeah, I feel like I was in most of those states.
They're also pretty. They're also pretty. Yeah. I believe I was in New Hampshire once, and this was back in maybe the late 80s, before everything became trendy. And we went to a pizza place, and they had American cheese on the pizza. So not the best look, but yeah.
Well, so. It's very American. Right?
Yeah.
That's everything here is American, even the cheese.
I was also there for the now that I remember it, the 2000 New Hampshire primary. I helped cover that at Boston University I covered it with my dear friend, Steve Kornacki, who is now a multimillionaire on MSNBC. And I'm here with you mugs doing this podcast. So what happened to me?
Maybe you should have got
sold my soul.
Yes, maybe Steve Kornacki sold his soul, right? He met Mr. Scratch when you were up in New Hampshire and you were busy doing something else.
If anyone could do the numbers on like the advantages or disadvantages of selling your soul, it would be Steve Kornacki. So
I'm sure.
But yeah, New Hampshire is a good state. You guys should go visit it. Let's do an Austin movie or road trip up to. We should just do a on the Food Network, people do these diners, drive-ins, and drives road trips from like place to place. We should do that with Austin Movie, or the Austin Movie Year, barnstorming tour of locations that we've covered on the film.
I'm not sure where we would end up, but it would be something. So Dave, you like this too, right? You enjoyed this film?
I did. And in the beginning, I thought it was going to just be too damn hokey. And I was like, it was losing me right at the beginning. But then there's that scene where the devil's like whispering in his ear and it's like all, shadows and everything. I was like, oh, this is actually pretty damn cool. And then from that point forward, I was kind of in mainly because of Mr. Scratch. I mean, he's just such a fun performance. But there's some really great stuff all around, though. Some really cool shots. The party scene I had written down, like you guys already talked about. And I love the mom. She's just, she's hilarious. I love how unimpressed by the money she is when he first gets all the money. That was a great part. But there's a lot to enjoy here. And the score, like we already talked about, is great. I wrote down a line from Daniel Webster I just wanted to mention when he's talking to Jabez's wife, and it says, "You've been chatting about like a woman nibbling around the point, never quite getting to one." I was like, that's some great 40s dialogue right there.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it's a great sort of 1940s meets 1840s dialogue going on there.
Women, right, Dave?
Yeah, exactly.
Women.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's not like that. That line is just, you could say that to anybody who's not getting to the point of what they're trying to talk about.
Sure.
I think the mom was a good example of a strong woman, though.
Yeah. I don't think this movie is. I mean, yes, Jabez's wife stands by him, but she doesn't stand by him in the sense that she is like not saying anything. She's real upset and she's definitely making her feelings known. It's just that she's not going to leave because that's not really something you could do as a farmer in the 1840s. And she has her child. I mean, she clearly cares about their son. And, even if you somehow could do that, you definitely can't take your kid with you. So there's no way she's going to abandon young Daniel, named after Daniel Webster.
His godfather.
Right, exactly. The alternative title for this film, The Godfather.
There you go.
So should we rate this out of 5 deals with the devil?
Sure. 5 souls, perhaps.
5 souls? Yeah.
Sure. Boys, sorry, 2 souls for me. This whole propaganda of 1941 is just not working for me at this point. Not to say the year isn't working, but all these propaganda films, I'm just not getting into it. And spoiler alert, we have another one coming up, and I didn't get into it.
Yeah, I mean, this is far less so than Sergeant York. I mean, to me, it was really, other than that big speech that Daniel Webster gives at the end, which, to be fair, is kind of like him getting up and saying, hey, everyone, here's the theme of the movie. But other than that, there was a lot more going on, where to me in Sergeant York, it was just hounding that patriotism constantly. And this had more universal themes and more creativity to it. But certainly when it got to that part about being American, I will say, though, there's also some critique of America in this film when the devil is talking about how he's been around since a bit before America was America. And he says, oh, I was there, when you swindled the first Indian or when the first slave ship arrived. Like, that's more critical analysis of American history than I would expect from a movie of this era.
And now they would throw him in jail for that. Josh, what did you give it then?
I give it 3.5 souls. I enjoyed it. It is, maybe it's hokey at times, maybe it's broad, but I thought it was really effectively made. It looks gorgeous. It has a cool, magical, realist, surreal tone. And I was skeptical, especially because you had said you hadn't liked it. And it sounded like what you didn't like is something that I wouldn't like either. But I'm against you on this.
Yeah, I like your pushback. You're like my wife if I was Jabez, but I'm not Jabez, but you're still like my wife. So that's exciting for all of us. Josh, I have one more question since we covered Hunchback of Notre Dame, William Dieterle, which I thought was really well done.
Yeah.
Which did you like better? Because I'll take Hunchback on that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I feel like they both have their strengths. I might have liked this one a little better, actually. I mean, and both of those are very well-known stories. And I mean, this is another thing I think that I stumbled into with the Maltese Falcon episode, is that I had watched another version of the same one because I thought that was, helpful research. And so it was watching the same story twice in a row. And I think maybe that was an issue for me with the Hunchback.
Yeah.
I don't know, but no, they're both very good. I mean, I think we'll talk more about Dieterle a bit later, but I think he is a very capable director who worked in a lot of different genres and maybe, doesn't get as much credit as he deserves. So Dave, how would you rate this film?
I'm also going with 3.5 souls. And I think it's just it's an interesting mix of ideas in this movie, like, and of genres too. Like, like you said, there's some kind of on the verge of horror-esque elements to it, but then it's also just a drama. There's some comedic elements. And I like that it's really well balanced.
Yeah, I think so. I think all of those things that could easily fall apart when you're trying to serve all of those different elements, and it doesn't. It's effective in all those ways. So we'll come back and talk about the legacy of All That Money Can Buy. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In this episode of our season on the films of 1941, we are talking about box office flop All That Money Can Buy. And we were just talking about director William Dieterle, who we did cover in our 1939 season in The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And he was really a journeyman and worked in a lot of different genres. He did direct a film that won Best Picture, The Life of Emile Zola, a biopic about Emile Zola, which I've never seen, but, wasn't like he didn't win an Oscar for directing.
He was nominated for it though.
But he wasn't like an A-list director, I guess, let's say. I mean, he worked a lot though. And interestingly, again, going back to the Maltese Falcon, he directed Satan Met a Lady, which was one of the earlier adaptations of the Maltese Falcon. And I've seen a bunch of his films, a lot of which are honestly kind of mediocre, but always delivered professionally, efficiently. He did make one of the earliest films with some material set in Las Vegas called Dark City. So, yeah, I don't know, Jason, have you seen other films of his that you like?
I mean, just the one that we talked about, Hunchback. Right. But I'm recalling Alex Proyas, Dark City.
No, not that one. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
That's a good film as well. So.
Yeah, different kind of, no, just like a crime picture with some Vegas material in it. But later in his life, after his Hollywood career kind of fizzled out, he moved back to his native Germany and became the director of a theater troupe. So for and fruitful career, just never on the level of other A-list directors from this period.
Yeah, but he did fine. So good for our boy Dieterle.
Yes. Lots of prolific character actors in this film. No really like A-list stars either, but Edward Arnold had an incredibly long career starting in 1916. He was often playing these kind of slimy authority figures. We did mention him in the Mr. Smith Goes to Washington episode where he plays the boss of the political machine. James Craig, also very prolific, is sometimes a leading man, but only in more like B pictures. He was in a lot of Westerns and later in his career retired and became a real estate agent.
And that's, hey, everyone needs houses. Josh, I have a really, really, really deep cut Edward Arnold awesome movie year connection to make for us right now.
All right.
An image of Edward Arnold made a posthumous appearance in Gremlins as the deceased husband of Mrs. Deagle, a character much like the rich, heartless characters Arnold was known for. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't think we mentioned that in our Gremlins episode, but good for Edward Arnold getting work from beyond the grave, perhaps due to his deal with the devil. Who knows? Yeah.
I mean, he's the one who fought the devil, Josh, as you know.
So. Well, his character did.
Right.
But if anyone's making deals with the devil, it's Hollywood actors.
Well, now, Josh, you're really getting into our conspiracy theorist audience that wants to hear about it. So tell us all about how babies are being harvested under the Getty Center.
No. We're not going to get into that at all. But the biggest star in this film, of course, Walter Huston, who is a very prolific actor on stage and on screen. We mentioned him in our Maltese Falcon episode, of course, where he makes a small appearance in that film that was directed by his son, John Huston. There's the whole Huston Hollywood dynasty. He won an Oscar for The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, which was directed by John Huston, which we also mentioned in that Maltese Falcon episode, and is great. He's fantastic in it. Humphrey Bogart great in that movie. A real combination of a lot of awesome movie year elements from this season going on in that film.
So Jane Darwell, who played Ma Stone, won an Academy Award. You called her Salt of the Earth. You can't be more Salt of the Earth than playing Ma Jode in The Grapes of Wrath. So that's pretty nice. A lot of Academy Award nominations here. Anne Shirley, who played Mary Stone, has a supporting actress nom for Stella Dallas. I think she was also Anne of Green Gables. So there is, and then your friend John Quaylen, Josh, who was Jesus Christ and the King of Kings, and was also in It's a Wonderful Life. And Lost Horizon, which we have probably mentioned here before. He was nominated for an Academy Award for that one.
And the thing I love about Anne Shirley is that her stage name, Anne Shirley, is the name of Anne of Green Gables.
Yeah.
She played Anne of Green Gables and was so successful at it that she just decided to use the character's name going forward. And I wish more actors would do that. I wish we had like Tony Stark and James Bond and Bruce Wayne starring in films now.
That would be good, Josh. I think that's good. Devil and Daniel Webster. Dave, have you seen The Devil and Daniel Johnston?
No, I've never seen it.
Have you seen that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a play on the title. It doesn't really have anything to do with the plot.
Sure, but it's a great documentary about a very interesting American singer-songwriter.
Yes.
I just wanted to say that.
No, it is a good film. Yeah. I have also seen it's been adapted. The story has been adapted in various ways. I mean, it's one of these things that's like parodied so often in various pop culture places. I'm sure we all remember the Simpsons version with Homer's soul donut that he's not supposed to eat.
Yes,
and,
love it.
That's a classic Simpsons episode. It was made it's almost like cursed, right? We talk about this film having flopped and it was recut and it was retitled. And the version from 2007 called Shortcut to Happiness similarly had very difficult road. It was shelved for like 6 years and recut. Alec Baldwin, who stars as Jabez Stone in that film and also directed it, took his name off of it as a director. it kind of limped out into theaters. And I actually saw and reviewed this film, which modernizes it and makes Jabez Stone into a novelist. And Daniel Webster is just a book publisher, which seems to sort of like, I don't know, miss the point of the whole deal. But Anthony Hopkins plays Daniel Webster in that film, and Jennifer Love Hewitt plays the devil. And I called it awkwardly paced, indifferently acted, and laughably hokey. So not a good film.
You're a Bosley Crowther of the 2000s.
I am, I guess. Although no one liked that movie. It was very poorly reviewed. I did want to mention Simone Simon, who I think is great, and she is best known for Cat People and the sequel to Cat People. And she had a career mainly in France, but Cat People is fantastic. It's, you want to talk about horror, it's like a horror classic, and she's really good in it. And Daniel Webster himself, the real Daniel Webster, we talked about, him taking his drink from the devil, was an alcoholic and died of cirrhosis of the liver. But my favorite thing about Daniel Webster was that his final words were, "I still live."
That's good. He did it.
He was wrong.
That.
Stephen Vincent Benét, who wrote obviously the story here and was one of the screenwriters. I think he's got 2 Pulitzers, Josh, one for this and one for John Brown's Body. So that's pretty good. So.
Yeah. I mean, this is, again, I feel like something that people have heard of, even if they haven't read the story or don't even know the details of it. It's one of these like foundational pieces of Americana.
Well, let me give you some fun facts, Josh, because, we love fun facts.
Sure.
The blizzard was made up of 1,200 pounds of shredded white onions, 2,500 pounds of mothballs, and a large amount of uncooked tapioca.
Oh my God, that must have smelled awful.
Hey, practical effects, baby. Let's go. This is an all-time awesome movie or fun fact, I feel like. William Dieterle had a habit of directing with white gloves on. Robert Wise said that everyone thought it was because he had a germ or dirt phobia. During shooting one of the scenes, Dieterle noticed there wasn't enough mud on the carriage wheel, pulled off his gloves, grabbed some mud, rubbed it on the wheel, wiped his hands on his pants, put his gloves back on, and continued directing.
I feel like not enough directors these days have like weird senses of personal style on set. I always love seeing pictures of Sam
Peter
Raimi.
Bogdanovich or someone like that.
With his ascot. And Sam Raimi is always wearing like a full 3-piece suit when he's directing.
Yeah.
And, that's good for him for like sticking with that, every other director just has a baseball cap and headphones, and that's fine. That's how I would probably dress, but still, it's cool to see them have their own flair.
The first scene, Dave, this one's for you as an animal lover. The first scene filmed was a disastrous sequence of events because that was when Jabez was trying to capture the piglet, but many takes were needed because the piglet wouldn't stop squealing. Finally, a prop man suggested massaging the piglet's scrotum, which did the trick.
Wow. There's a horny pig there in the film.
That's the opposite of no animals were harmed in the making of this movie.
Yeah, animals were pleasured making this film.
Talk about the devil and Miss Jones. So.
Oh, wow.
Hey, Josh, let me just give you one last quote. I know we're kind of all over the place, but I thought this was awesome because of Bernard Herrmann. What he did was he had one violinist play the same song in 4 different keys. And then someone asked him like, well, why didn't you just have 4 violinists play it? And he said, it's only a small point in the film. And yet I feel a composer who doesn't pay as much attention to a small point like that is really being overpaid and should be dismissed, because he wanted it to sound like that disparate as opposed to that composed.
Yeah. That's cool. He's brilliant, obviously. And this score is great.
And maybe they rubbed his scrotum.
Jason, you know any Jabez's?
I know a Joan Baez, but that's the closest I get.
To that point, I did want to mention, obviously inspired by at least the original story, Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny. Jack Black's Tenacious D name is Jables, and I had to pause this to make sure I wasn't hearing it wrong if it was Jables. But yeah, what is Jabez? That's a weird name.
I don't know. And I think, it was a long time ago, obviously, that I saw that Alec Baldwin movie, but I was amused that the movie that came out in 2007 kept Jabez as the character's name. Because maybe it was a thing that people were named in 1840, but certainly not in 2007. So
It's time to bring it back, Josh.
Yeah, I should have looked up where it is on the list of baby names being used. Is anybody naming their child Jabez right now?
Well, according to Google AI Overview, the name Jabez.
That's very trustworthy.
I'm just telling you, I just Googled it real fast. It's now there are two different ones. The AI Overview says he makes sorrowful or born in pain in Hebrew. So that's not great. That's not a good one.
Well, I mean, they do compare him. They mention Job. And so I wonder if it was sort of a play on that as well, that biblical story. So,
I mean, what a terrible way to set your kid up, though. Like, hey, I'm going to name you sorrowful and born in pain. Have a good life, fella.
Yeah, well, it didn't work out for Jabez Stone, but maybe it
did in the end, Josh.
Maybe it'll work out for Jabez Harris. So
there is none. There is none.
That's all that money can buy, and that is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. You can sell us your soul online and on social media.
Don't forget to give us your story porn recs there at awesomemovieyear.com, Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Of course, we're not on Twitter anymore because speaking of selling your soul to the devil, it already did that many times over. But I'm Jason Harris Comedy or Jay Harris Comedy and all the things. Go for Jason on Letterboxd. We got trivia nights, we got comedy, we got Eat This Comedy. Come out and see a thing.
You can find some old stuff from me at joshbellhateseverything.com. I am at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, at Signal Bleed on Blue Sky, and on Letterboxd. And if you're on Letterboxd and you watch this movie or any of the movies we talk about on the show, tag your review Awesome Movie Year. We would love to know what you think. And check out our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
Check out Piecing It Together wherever you listen to podcasts and follow us on social media at Piecing Pod.
Jason, what's in our next episode?
Josh, we are going to the documentary, which I believe won Best Documentary in the Oscars in 1941.
Yeah, it was a sort of special award because there was not a competitive award yet, but it did win the Oscar for the Best Documentary Feature, yes.
It's a British military propaganda film called Target for Tonight, which sounds like a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie.
It is not, though. So
I wish
Van Damme fans, hold off for now. We'll probably get to him eventually, but
they got to.
Tune in next time for Target for Tonight, and thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
An All Points West production, produced by David Rosen in Las Vegas.